Hello and welcome for another set of matches with Vintage for StarCityGames.com. I'm Drew Levin, and this is a really sweet Grixis deck that some Italian dude finished second place with in a small Vintage event a few weeks ago. I am giving Mana Drain another shot, mostly because this deck is awesome. It has the new Conspiracy Planeswalker Dak Faden, which is, I think, a pretty sweet way of attacking threat light workshop decks. And it's got a bunch of cards that line up well in blue matchups. It's got Dark Confidant and Yawgmoth's Will, both of which I'm huge fans of. And, like, your assorted other blue stuff, right? Like, it's really hard to sort of distinguish for a newcomer between, like, Flusterstorm and Mental Misstep and Snapcaster Mage and Mana Drain versus, like, Spell Pierce and various other packages that all do the same sort of stack interaction plus playing an instant speed game. So it will be interesting to sort of educate myself some more about how specific card choices work. But the general point of this is that it is in fact a Yawgmoth's Will deck with the ability to tinker into Blightsteel and some Planeswalkers and Mana Drains and Snapcaster Mages and Dark Confidants for longevity. So very, very much different from the bug deck that we were playing last week where we wanted to wasteland aggressively. Unlike that, we want to get 2 blue sources into play so that we can cast Mana Drain, but we want to get even more into play so that we can start casting Jace and have some absurd Yawgmoth's Will turn. So we're here. Our opening hand is 1 blue source, Brainstorm, 2 Force Wills, and a Jace. So we have the ability to get something going pretty early. We can fetch a basic island. We can also fetch either dual. But since we can't play a turn 1 Jace, it's unlikely that we're going to be fetching with Scalding Tarn. However, I think we are going to play out our artifact mana. We learned that lesson last time when we got locked out of being able to do stuff by a workshop deck. Like, we had, I think, land Mana Crypt in our hand, and we played the land and not the Mana Crypt because we were afraid of the, like, 1.5 damage that we were going to take. And then they cast, I don't know, any sphere ever, and we felt really bad about it because we just didn't get to play Magic that game. So that's the spot we're in, where I think it's just correct, unless you're Storm, and even then, sometimes mostly not correct. What I'm trying to say is that it's mostly correct to play out your mana as soon as possible, and that there are exceptions for Storm, but that they are probably fewer than I would think. Because Storm has the ability to just draw entirely new 7s, and generate a lot of additional storm count that way, that it is far rarer that storming is an exercise in counting to only 10 in Vintage, whereas in Legacy, there's a lot more needle threading. So we're going to pass here. I think that it's probably worth end-step brainstorming just because we have an implied additional 2 looks at a second blue mana for Jace. Here, however, we just get to fetch. So they fetched off of Bloodstained Mire, so I'm going to assume we're in a blue mirror, since when we played Storm in our first video, it had all blue fetches. So, like, this could be the, like, 1 black fetch that it's correct to play, but I would rather just hedge. And since we have more black than red, gonna get an Underground Sea. And cast Brainstorm with the intent of hiding our Jace. Although it turns out to not come to that. However, we are going to be in a tough spot over the next couple of turns. So we're going to let them see our hand, since I don't really want to pay 2 life when they could pay 2 life. Because, like, I doubt they take any of the 3 forcibles that we have. So if they take misstep, then it's, yeah, just them paying 2 life instead of us. So I will now proceed to show you how good I run at life, as I seemingly never lose a mana crypt flip. So they get our Dak Fade in, which is why we put it on top, is if they had a follow-up, then they wouldn't get our Jace. So they cast a bunch of discard spells. I don't think we can let this one resolve. This one seems really bad for us. Okay. This is also sort of one of my big issues with blue decks in this format, is just like legacy decks have very... Okay, so this is clearly like cantrip-oriented combo. Anyway, blue decks in Legacy have just like a ton of cantrips that they can cast off of a single blue that enable them to find a second blue. Vintage decks don't really play Preordain that much. Ugh. So, like, this situation is starting to feel, like, fairly typical. Just, like, not doing anything. Although if they cast another Cruel Bargain, then, like, we're good to go. But I have a feeling they're going to cast Dark Ritual and kill us. Alright. Well, they sort of have to take Lightning Bolt at this point, since it's getting to be the point where it kills them. Alright. Well. I have to imagine if they can kill us with... If they can't kill us with, like, 4 lands in play and 7 cards in hand, that they probably misbuilt their deck. Also with us on 12, like, they only have to storm for 6. Okay. So, assume it's like Vampiric, probe into, like, whatever it is that they put on top. Oh no, they can't cast probe at this point. Okay. Did we get another turn here? No, we couldn't possibly. So they DT for Yawgmoth's Will, probably. Cabal Ritual, also fine. Yeah, okay. And then they just, like, flash back their mana and kill us. Cool. So, we did not really play Magic that game, furthering my feelings about how vintage mana bases are super blue light. There are 15 blue lands, 16 if you count Sapphire, which is, like, pretty iffy, considering you're trying to cast, like, Drain and Jace and Snapcaster for a blue spell. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that these mana bases are real shaky. Regardless, we are in the business of cutting some cards, so let's get down to it. I don't think Dak Vaden is great if they're just like mono black combo with some extra stuff. I'm not really interested in all of the like workshop hate for them. Not interested in the fish hate. Not interested in making them pick up their artifacts. One of the draws for me was being able to Pithing Needle Bazaar of Baghdad. I think that that's sweet. But we aren't there yet. Assuming that we play Dredge. I assume we're going to play Dredge. So, them playing combo. Lightning Bolt is probably just too much of a dream. Like, snipe them after a Cruel Bargain. Anyway, we've got a turn 1 Confidant. We're going to run that. Confidant with Force backup, so like, I'm gonna be really ashamed if we lose this one to a combo deck. Drawing Force of Will in this format is just like, so much absurdly better than drawing Force of Will in Legacy. So yeah, tap our non-blue sources. No Fear of Wasteland out of their Cruel Bargain deck. I'm not a huge fan of forcing Black Lotus. I am a huge fan of forcing Necropotence. Apparently I'm also a huge fan of playing a fetch land that I didn't reveal, which is really cool, because now he knows that I've got one of those. Cool. So, thankfully, narrowly dodged the 12-point Blightsteel shot. Always a fun game. So now it's just our Confidant versus our deck. Because if that's the case, I think we're ahead. Okay, so let's stop on our opponent's turn and snipe all of their Cruel Bargains. Over here. So we get to see their deck. Always good. So it looks like there's Storm with not so many of the draw 7s, but lots more of the discard spells and some artifact hate. Like Rebuild and Rack and Ruin. So they boarded in their workshop hate against us, which makes sense, like we're a Tolarian Academy deck. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what the draw of this deck is, and it looks like it's no probes. Like, trying to compare it against the vintage Storm deck that we had. So, like, Yeah, we had just like probes and a bunch of draw 7s, and they have bargain, more Cabal rituals, and just like a bunch of artifacts. Okay. I'm okay with this. Ooh. Okay. Well. We are never going to take damage from our Dark Confidant again. And we might as well shuffle away our Blightsteel. And our opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes, since we're going to brainstorm that island back to the top of our deck every turn for the rest of the game. So, I guess that's one way of doing things, is forcing their Necro on turn 1. Obviously, like, the game is way worse for us if we don't have that Force of Will. So, chalk one up to playing Force of Will in Vintage. Who knew? So now that we know that they're playing a bunch of artifacts, is there anything that we want to do differently? Like, we could cut the Tinker package. But I don't know what we're going to bring in that's better. We could Needle, Jar, or Necropotence. That seems fine. I'm not a huge fan of Blightsteel if they have Rebuild. But that might just be overly cautious. But like being able to tinker for Time Vault or Key just seems like safer. They also have Chain of Vapor, so. I don't know. Dak Faden doesn't seem great here. Cage doesn't seem phenomenal. I guess we can board in a Massacre to cover the Warren's angle of things. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, there's certainly a way to clean up. So, gonna cut Tinker and Blightsteel. I think it's wrong, but I want to see what happens if we sideboard into like a super overly cautious deck that just kills with like J Snapcaster Bob. Snap keeping again. Basically the same hand as last game. You can have that one. Also that one. That one too. The best part is that our hand is actually just Thoughtseize and Duress proof. He has to have like 2 pieces of action at the end of this. And now doesn't have the mana to cast both of them. So, Pack Rat, cute. So like the last card in his hand has to be Time Twister for this to be at all punishing. So I'm willing to run this. Twister or Windfall, I suppose. Yep, Twister. Okay. Wow. This looks good for us. So we're gonna needle jar. Yeah, we've got a needle memory jar. Like, we could needle necro, but he has tinker for jar, so that's sort of the tiebreaker. Could have also needled pack rat, but I'm not interested in that fight. I think we're going to end up taking infinite turns. Oh, we messed up. This should be this, so that if we bob into Vampiric, we can win the game on the spot. So basically, the deck we're playing against is like whether or not draw 7s are better than draw 4s. Good thoughtseize. So we're kind of on the clock on the whole finding our time vault thing. And our opponent doesn't know it, but they're dead next turn. Which is kind of sweet. Although, I suppose they could make some rats, if they so desired. It's really cute. But, basically as soon as we draw a piece of action, I think we're fine. Right, so they grow them to 4/4s, we take 8 and go to 9. Jesus. Well, I suppose that is a real way to lose. Have Pithing Needle lose to Pack Rat. Okay. I mean, good beats. And they can just activate twice and deal us 12, yeah. Fair enough. Pack Rat and Vintage, folks. You saw it here first. Well, you probably didn't if you like play Vintage a lot. You've probably seen it somewhere else. But someone getting demolished by Pack Rat and Vintage. Certainly reasonable. I'll be right back.